When he said he would fight in court to take my daughter from me, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. For a moment, I thought he would succeed. After all, for years, I believed everything he said, including when he said I wasn't good enough to be a mother. But today I tell this story with my head held high, because the judge granted me full custody, and more importantly than that, I finally got myself back. My name is Hana. I'm 28 years old, and I'm a young Korean woman who always believed in happy endings. When I met Minho, I thought I had found mine. He was charismatic, kind, seemed to understand my every silence. In the beginning, it was like living inside a dream. He would take me to watch the sunset at the Han River, make plans for the future, and say I would be the perfect mother of our children. And I believed him. I felt chosen, loved, safe. I never imagined that the same man who once held my belly while our daughter grew would later try to tear me away from her. I remember the day we met as if it were yesterday. It was an autumn afternoon in Seoul, one of those when leaves fall gently and the air has that characteristic smell of changing seasons. I was in a cafe near the university, sitting at a table by the window, drawing in my notebook, something I'd always done since childhood. Drawing was my way of processing the world, of transforming feelings into lines and colors. That particular day, I was trying to capture the expression of an elderly lady who sold roasted chestnuts on the corner. There was something about the way she smiled at customers that deeply touched me. He approached with that smile that seemed to light up the entire environment. He wore a beige sweater and carried a cup of coffee in his hand. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, with a soft and captivating voice, "but I couldn't help noticing your drawings. They're incredible." I looked up, surprised. It wasn't common for people to comment on my work, especially strangers. He asked if he could sit at the same table. The cafe was full, so it seemed like a reasonable request. I said yes. We talked for hours. He spoke about his dreams, about how he worked at a tech company, but secretly wanted to do something more meaningful with his life. He talked about his childhood, about how his mother always encouraged him to seek genuine relationships, not superficial ones. He commented on how he wanted to build a family, about how he valued sensitive and creative people like me. I felt seen in a way I had never experienced before. For the first time in my life, someone seemed to understand exactly who I was, or at least that's what I believed. He looked at my notebook again and asked if he could see more drawings. I, normally shy with my work, found myself flipping through the pages for him without hesitation. He commented on each illustration with genuine enthusiasm, or what seemed genuine at the time. "You have a gift," he said, lightly touching the page where I had drawn a child flying a kite. "These images tell stories. Have you ever thought about exhibiting your work?" No one had ever told me that before. My family always treated my drawing as a cute hobby, nothing serious. But here was someone saying I had talent, that my work was worth something. When we said goodbye that afternoon, he asked for my number. He said he would love to talk more, learn more about me and my art. I gave it to him, with my heart racing and that butterfly feeling in my stomach that we only get when we meet someone special. I walked home floating, barely believing what had happened. The first months were magical, as I said. But let me tell you in more detail what that period was like, because it's important to understand the depth of the enchantment, to later comprehend the depth of the fall. He would take me to discover new places every week, small restaurants hidden in Itaewon alleys, independent art galleries in Hongdae, secret viewpoints where we could see the entire city lit up at night. Always holding my hand firmly, as if wanting to protect me from the world, as if I were too precious to be left alone. He introduced me to his friends at a party in a co-worker's apartment. I was nervous, worried about making a good impression. "Don't worry," he said, stroking my hair. "They'll love you, like I love you." It was the first time he said it. I love you. 3 words that changed everything. I felt my chest tighten with emotion, my eyes filling with tears of happiness. I replied that I loved him too, and that night was perfect, or seemed to be. His friends were kind to me, included me in conversations, asked questions about my life and my drawings, but looking back now, I realized there was something rehearsed about that kindness, as if they already knew exactly how to act, what role to play. At the time, I didn't notice. I was blinded by love, by the feeling of belonging. I remember one specific night, about 3 months after we met. We were sitting on the bank of the Han River, watching the city lights reflected in the water. It was a summer night. The air was warm, but there was a gentle breeze that made everything perfect. He had brought a blanket and some snacks. We stayed there, lying side by side, looking at the stars, or trying to see them despite the city's light pollution. That's when he turned to me, propped himself up on his elbow, and looked at me with that intensity that made my heart race. "Hana," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to build a life with you. I want you to be the mother of my children. I want to grow old by your side. I want to wake up every day and see your face on the pillow next to mine." My heart beat so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. Tears ran down my face before I could even control them. That was everything I had always wanted to hear. Someone who chose me, who wanted me, who saw a future with me. "I want that too," I replied, my voice trembling. "I want all of that with you." He kissed me, and in that moment I was absolutely certain I had found my place in the world, my happy ending. I didn't realize in that beautiful moment under the stars that those beautiful words were just the beginning of a carefully constructed trap, that this intense and fast love was actually the bait that would trap me later. Before I continue, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more real stories like this. And tell me in the comments, have you ever believed in someone who made you doubt yourself? Where are you watching from? This is a conversation between friends, and maybe my story will remind you of something you also lived through. Because you see, I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm here to share what I lived through, in the hope that someone going through something similar will notice the signs before it's too late. Or, if it's already too late, know that there's still a way out. There always is, and I'm living proof of that. The first signs that something was wrong came quietly, so subtly that I almost didn't notice. Actually, I noticed, but chose to ignore it. You know when you feel that discomfort in your stomach, that little voice inside your head saying something isn't right, but you muffle it because you want to believe everything is fine. It was exactly that. It started with small criticisms disguised as care. The first time I noticed was at a dinner with his friends. About 6 months after we started dating, we were at a traditional Korean restaurant, sitting on the floor around a low table. I was telling a funny story about something that had happened in art class, gesturing a lot as I always do when I'm excited, and laughing at my own story. When I finished, I noticed he was looking at me strangely. He didn't say anything at the time, but on the way home, in the car, he commented, "Did you notice you talked very loud at dinner?" I was confused. "Did I? Sorry, I didn't realize." "Yes, you did. And you laughed very loud too. People were looking." He said this in a soft tone, almost gentle, but there was something sharp underneath. "I'm not criticizing you. I just think you should pay more attention. My friends are more reserved. You understand, right?" I felt a pang of shame. Had I really been too noisy? Had I embarrassed him in front of his friends? "Sorry," I said quietly. "I didn't mean to bother anyone." "I know you didn't mean to," he replied, taking my hand and squeezing it gently. "That's why I'm telling you. It's to help you improve, because I care about you." And there was the perfect trap. Criticism wrapped in care. How could I be angry with someone who was just trying to help me? The criticisms continued, always subtle, always disguised as concern. My way of dressing became a target after that. "That dress is beautiful," he would say. "But don't you think it's a bit too flashy? Don't you want to look serious?" Or, "That skirt is gorgeous, but maybe it's better to save it for when it's just the two of us." You know how men are. The message was clear. I needed to hide myself, diminish myself, take up less space. I changed my wardrobe gradually. The vibrant colors I loved, sunny yellows, vibrant reds, electric blues, were replaced by neutral tones: beige, gray, black, white, safe, discreet, invisible. The skirts I loved wearing, that made me feel feminine and free, gave way to more conservative pants, dark jeans, shapeless pieces. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't understand why I felt so faded, so different from the girl I used to be. But he smiled when I wore the clothes he approved of. He hugged me and said, "Now you look like a real woman, mature, elegant." And I believed that was love, that he was molding me, perfecting me, transforming me into the best version of myself. I didn't understand that I was just erasing myself. The criticisms extended to other areas. My way of cooking wasn't good enough. My mother makes bulgogi differently, he would say, pushing the plate away with little enthusiasm. More flavorful. You should ask her for the recipe. I tried to make it exactly like his mother, but it never turned out the same. You're trying, at least, he would say, with that tone of poorly disguised disappointment. My way of cleaning the house also didn't meet his expectations. You left dust here, he would point out, running his finger along a high shelf I could barely reach. You need to be more attentive to details. I would clean again and again, trying to reach an impossible standard of perfection. Even my drawings, which he had praised so much in the beginning, became targets of subtle criticisms. You still draw that much? He would ask when he saw me with my notebook. Wouldn't it be better to use that time to do something more productive? When I asked what he meant by productive, he would reply, I don't know, cook. Organize the house. Take care of yourself. Drawing doesn't pay bills, Hana. I started drawing less and less. My notebooks were stored in a drawer, and then in a box, and then at the back of the closet, where I didn't have to look at them and feel guilty about not being productive. The part of me I loved most, my creativity, my artistic expression, was being buried alive, and I didn't even realize it. I stopped going out with friends. Whenever I made plans, he had a way of making me feel guilty. You're going to leave me alone again? He would ask, with that abandoned puppy face. I work all week and barely see you, but it's okay, if your friends are more important. He never prohibited directly. He didn't need to. The guilt he planted was enough. I started canceling meetings. Sorry, something came up, I would tell my friends. Or, I'm too tired today. Let's leave it for another time. And after a while, they stopped calling. Not because they didn't care, but because it was exhausting to receive no after no. I understood. If I were in their place, I would have done the same. I became increasingly isolated. My world was reduced to him, the apartment we shared, and the part-time job I had at a bookstore. Even work, he criticized. Why do you need to work? He would say. I earn enough for both of us. You could stay home, take better care of things here. But I insisted on keeping the job. It was my only contact with the outside world, my only window to a life beyond him. Looking back, I think some part of me knew I needed that independence, even if small. Every decision in my life came to depend on his approval. What I was going to cook for dinner, what movie we were going to watch, whether I could or couldn't visit my family on the weekend. I asked for his opinion on everything, afraid of doing something wrong, afraid of disappointing him, afraid of provoking that look of disappointment that hurt more than any shouting. And the worst part is that I thought it was normal. I thought I was being a good girlfriend, a good partner, that I was smoothing the rough edges of the relationship, compromising, being flexible. I didn't understand that I was losing pieces of myself in the process, that I was becoming a shadow of the person I used to be. It was in this context that I discovered I was pregnant. I remember the exact moment. I was in the bathroom of our house, holding the pregnancy test with trembling hands. 2 pink lines, positive. My heart raced. A mixture of fear, joy, panic, and hope all at the same time. We weren't trying, but we weren't preventing either. It was one of those, if it happens situations. When I told him, his reaction was intense. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. You're pregnant, he repeated several times, as if trying to process the information. We're going to have a baby. We're going to be a family. There were tears in his eyes. Tears of happiness, I thought at the time. Now I wonder if they weren't tears of satisfaction for having gotten what he wanted, to trap me completely. He was excited about the news. He started making plans immediately. What the baby's room would be like. He insisted it would be a girl. Said he was sure. What name we would give. He wanted a traditional Korean name, something that honored his family. What our routine would be like when she was born. He described idyllic scenarios of family afternoons, walks in the park, quiet dinners. I floated with happiness. Despite all the strange things that had been happening in our relationship, I thought the baby's arrival would fix everything, that it would unite us in a deeper way, that finally we were building something together, something that was ours. How wrong I was. As the pregnancy progressed, The criticisms that were once subtle became more direct and frequent. My body, which was going through natural and necessary transformations, became a constant target. "You're gaining too much weight," he would comment, looking at my belly with disapproval. "Are you sure you're eating the right things?" I was following all medical guidelines, eating in a healthy and balanced way, but that didn't matter to him. He had read somewhere on the internet that pregnant women shouldn't gain more than X kilograms, and he obsessively monitored my weight. When I came back from prenatal appointments and mentioned I had gained another kilo, he would frown and sigh. "You need to control yourself more," he would say. "Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can eat anything." I tried to explain that my body needed those nutrients, that the baby was growing, that the doctor was satisfied with my progress. But he always had a comeback. "Doctors say that to everyone. You need to be more responsible." The criticisms extended to everything related to the pregnancy. When I commented that I was tired, that I needed to lie down for a bit, he would retort with examples of other pregnant women he knew. "Jehoon's wife worked until the last day of pregnancy and didn't complain that much," he would say. "My mother's sister had 3 children and was never so dramatic." As if my experience wasn't valid, as if what I felt didn't matter. When I cried, and I cried a lot because of hormonal changes and the emotional stress of being in an increasingly toxic relationship, he would sigh with impatience. "Again?" he would ask with that tired tone. "You cry about everything. This isn't healthy for the baby. You're being selfish." Selfish. That word hit me like a punch. I was carrying his daughter inside me, going through all the transformations and discomforts of pregnancy, trying to keep the house in order and him happy, and still I was selfish. I started questioning myself. Was he right? Was I really being too dramatic? Didn't other pregnant women behave better than me? I started hiding my emotions. When I felt like crying, I would go to the bathroom and turn on the shower so he wouldn't hear. When I was exhausted and needed to lie down, I would wait for him to leave the house to rest, afraid of being judged. When I felt pain or discomfort, I minimized it, said everything was fine. I became an actress in my own relationship, playing the role of the perfect pregnant woman he expected me to be. Prenatal appointments became a source of anxiety. He always wanted to go along, which at first seemed romantic to me, a present and interested father. But I soon realized he was going to monitor, to hear what the doctor said, and then use that information against me. "The doctor said you need to exercise more," he would remind me, even when the doctor had only suggested light walks. "You're not doing it. You're not taking care of our daughter properly." My daughter. He always said, "our daughter," but there was something in the way he pronounced "our" that sounded more like "my," as if I were just a temporary incubator, and the baby really belonged to him. I started feeling inadequate, even for something as natural as carrying my own daughter inside me. I looked at my growing belly, and, instead of feeling pride and connection, I felt anxiety. Was I doing it right? Was I being good enough? Did I deserve to be a mother? These doubts consumed me. At night, while he slept, I stayed awake with my hand on my belly, feeling the baby's kicks, and whispered apologies. "Forgive me if I'm not doing it right," I said to her. "I'll try to be better. I promise." My mother noticed something was wrong. On one of the rare visits I made to my parents' house during pregnancy, she pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. "You seem so faded," she said, with concern written on her face. "You're not the Hana I know. What's happening?" I tried to smile, tried to convince her everything was fine. "It's just the pregnancy, Mom. I'm tired, that's all." But she didn't believe it. She held my hands and looked deep into my eyes. "Hana, if you need help, if you need to get out of there, our door is always open. You know that, right?" I nodded my head, but said nothing. Part of me wanted to collapse in her arms and tell her everything. But the other part, the part that had been shaped by months of manipulation, was convinced the problem was me, that if I just tried harder, was better, more perfect, everything would work out. My daughter was born on a spring morning, after 18 hours of labor. It was the most painful, and at the same time most transformative process of my life. When I finally saw her, with those dark little eyes trying to focus on my face, the tiny fingers opening and closing, I felt a love I didn't even know existed. It was as if my heart had expanded to fit an entire universe inside it. I held her in my arms, that small and perfect being, and silently promised I would do everything to protect her, that I would give her a life full of love, security, and happiness, that I would be the best mother I could be. Tears ran down my face, tears of joy, relief, overwhelming love. Minho was by my side, smiling, taking pictures. He held the baby after me, and I saw something on his face that gave me chills, an expression of possession, as if she were a trophy, an achievement. But I pushed that thought away. I was being paranoid, I told myself. It was just a proud father. We named her Minji, a name that means wisdom and intelligence. I wanted her to grow up strong, smart, capable of making her own decisions and defending her own opinions. Everything I wasn't being. The first months with Minji were simultaneously the most beautiful and the most difficult of my life. I loved her with an intensity that scared me. Every smile of hers, even if they were just gas at first, lit up my day. Every sound she made filled me with tenderness. I could spend hours just watching her sleep, observing the little chest rising and falling, the lips making sucking movements even in sleep. But it was also exhausting. I woke up several times during the night to breastfeed. The first weeks were especially difficult because she had trouble latching properly, and my nipples became sore and painful. Each feeding was torture, but I insisted because I wanted to give the best to my daughter. During the day, I changed diapers constantly, gave baths, rocked her to sleep, tried to decipher each cry to understand what she needed. I was constantly tired, with deep dark circles, my hair always tied in a messy bun, but I was happy, or would be happy if he let me, because the criticisms didn't stop. Actually, they intensified. He complained that the house was always messy. "How can you not keep things organized?" he would ask, pointing to the bottles in the sink waiting to be washed, to the baby clothes scattered on the sofa waiting to be folded. Other women managed to take care of their children and still keep the house impeccable. I tried to explain that taking care of a newborn was a full-time job, that there was barely time to eat, let alone clean the entire house. But for him, these were excuses. "You need to learn to organize yourself better," he would say. "You need to be more efficient." He also complained that I didn't have time for him. "You're obsessed with the baby," he accused. "You barely look at me. It's like I don't exist to you anymore." I tried to divide my attention, tried to be a good mother and a good partner simultaneously, but it was impossible. I only had 2 hands, 2 hours of sleep per night, and a reserve of energy that was constantly in the negative. I started multitasking. I woke up earlier to try to get some housework done before the baby woke up. I slept even less if that was possible. I neglected my own needs, food, hygiene, rest, to try to meet his expectations. But it was never enough. Never. The friends who still kept in touch with me stopped calling, not because they didn't care, but because I always canceled meetings. "I can't leave the baby," I would say, or "I'm too tired to go out." And gradually, silence settled in. I was completely alone with him, with the baby, and with a loneliness that ached in my chest. I completely stopped drawing. My notebooks remained stored at the back of the closet, and I didn't even think about them anymore. Drawing seemed like a luxury from a past life, from a person I wasn't anymore. The Hana who drew, who dreamed in colors, who had artistic ambitions. She had died, and in her place, there was an exhausted, insecure woman who just wanted to survive each day. Every decision related to Minji needed his approval. What clothes she would wear, what song I would sing for her to sleep, what time she should take a nap, whether I could or couldn't take her to visit my parents. I was afraid to make any decision alone, afraid of doing it wrong, afraid of harming my daughter. And he used this against me. "You don't even know how to choose an outfit for the baby without asking me," he would say, with poorly disguised contempt. "How are you going to raise her alone if something happens to me?" It was a veiled threat, but I didn't understand at the time. Or maybe I didn't want to understand. The painful discovery, the one that changed everything, came when Minji was 4 months old. It was a regular Saturday, the kind that starts peacefully, with no indication of the emotional earthquake that's about to happen. I was organizing her room, folding the tiny clothes with my usual care, separating those that no longer fit to donate. It was impressive how fast she grew. Those newborn clothes that seemed so big when we bought them now barely fit over her little feet. He had gone out to meet some friends. "I'm going to have a beer with the guys," he said. quickly kissing my face. "I'll be back tonight." I felt a secret relief. A few hours without walking on eggshells, without being afraid of doing something wrong. A few hours of peace. Minji was sleeping in the crib, with that calm and peaceful breathing of babies. I was taking advantage of that rare moment of silence to put things in order. That's when I heard the vibration of his cell phone coming from the bedroom. I went to check and saw he had forgotten the device on the bed. Rare thing. He was almost glued to that phone. It wasn't my habit to go through his things. I always respected his privacy, always trusted blindly. But that day, something inside me, an intuition, a premonition, the survival instinct that had been asleep for so long, made me pick up the cell phone. The screen was unlocked. There were several message notifications, group chats, individual messages. My hand trembled as I scrolled through the screen. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I didn't suspect anything. But then I saw the name of a group that caught my attention. Guys' Night. I opened it without thinking much, and what I saw there completely destroyed what was left of my world. They were conversations between him and his closest friends, messages exchanged over months. I started reading from the most recent ones and went back in time, each message being a deeper stab. "Man, I can't take it anymore," he wrote in a message from 2 weeks ago. "She's unbearable since the baby was born. Just cries, just complains, doesn't take care of the house properly." One of the friends replied, "That sucks, man, but it passes. After the baby grows a bit, it gets better. I don't know if I can wait." He retorted, "Honestly, I regret it. This isn't how I imagined having a family." I felt my stomach turn. I kept reading, with my hands shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. There were messages where he imitated things I said, distorting my words to make his friends laugh. "You should see how she gets," he wrote. "Paranoid about everything. Oh, is the baby breathing right? Oh, is she cold? It's pathetic." The friends laughed, sent laughing emojis, made jokes. None of them defended me. None questioned. They were accomplices. But the worst was still to come. I found an older conversation, from when I was still pregnant. "I'm gathering evidence," he wrote. "If we separate, I don't want her to keep the baby. I've already started documenting her craziness, the emotional instabilities. I'm going to prove she's not fit to be a mother." My heart stopped. I read the message again and again, trying to process what I was seeing. He was planning to take Minji from me, and it wasn't something new, something motivated by momentary anger. It was something calculated, coldly planned since pregnancy. Another friend asked, "Are you sure? Isn't that a bit radical?" "It's the only option," he replied. "I'm not going to let my daughter be raised by someone so unstable. If I get custody, at least she'll have a normal life." There were more messages, many more. Months and months of conversations where he ridiculed me, diminished me, planned to destroy me. Each word was a stab. Each message confirmed that everything, the love, the affection, the plans for the future, had been a farce. I remember the cold feeling rising through my hands as I read, the breathing that became increasingly difficult, as if someone was squeezing my throat, the heavy silence that filled the room, broken only by the soft sound of Minji's breathing in the crib beside me. I sat on the bed, still holding the phone, and let reality hit me full force. He never loved me. He never wanted to build a life with me. He just wanted someone who would obey, someone he could control, mold according to his will. And I, naive and desperate for love, had given him exactly that. The tears came, silent and heavy. They weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, shame, mourning for everything I had lost in the process. Mourning for the Hana who drew, who laughed loud, who wore vibrant colors. Mourning for the years I had wasted trying to be perfect for someone who would never value me. But there was something different too. Along with the pain, I felt a clarity I hadn't had in a long time. As if a thick fog had finally dissipated, and I could see things as they really were. There was no more doubt, more confusion, more hope that things would get better. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I needed to get out of there, that I needed to protect my daughter, that I needed to protect myself. I stayed in the room for hours, waiting for him to come back, rehearsing what I was going to say. When I finally heard the key in the door, it was already night. He entered the apartment whistling, clearly in a good mood. I went to the living room with his phone in my hand. "What are you doing with my phone?" he asked, and his expression changed instantly when he saw my face. First surprise, then calculation, then anger. "I read the messages," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I read everything." He stood still for a moment, processing. Then he gave a dry laugh, without humor. "You snooped through my stuff? You're planning to take my daughter from me," I replied, ignoring his accusation. "For months, since before she was born. You don't know how to interpret context, Hana." He used that condescending tone I hated. "I was venting to my friends. It's normal. Everyone does it. It doesn't mean anything. You said you're gathering evidence against me, that you want to prove I'm an inadequate mother. How does that not mean anything? You're being dramatic." As always, he approached, trying to take the phone from my hand. "Give me that." I took a step back. "No, give me the phone. Now." His voice became lower, more threatening. "No," I repeated more firmly. "I'm leaving." He laughed again, but this time there was something cruel in the laugh. "Where to, Hana? You don't have a job. You don't have your own money. You have nowhere to go. And you're going to take Minji? I'll go to court tomorrow. I'll tell them everything. How unstable you are. How you're always crying. How you can't even take care of the house properly. No judge will give you custody." And there it was. The threat he had been holding for months, finally said out loud. And the worst part is that he believed it. He believed he would succeed. He believed I was too weak, too broken, too insignificant to fight against him. But something inside me, something that had been asleep for so long I had forgotten it existed, woke up at that moment. It was anger. A clean, just, powerful anger. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw the man he really was. Small, weak, pathetic. A man so insecure he needed to destroy others to feel important. "You can try," I said, with a calm that surprised us both. "But I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight with everything I have. And you're going to lose." That night, I slept in Minji's room, on the floor, next to her crib. I put down an old blanket and a pillow, but could barely close my eyes. I kept looking at her sleeping. So small, so innocent, so oblivious to the chaos happening around her. And I made another promise, a promise that this time I would keep. "I'm going to protect you," I whispered to her. "No matter what happens, I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to protect myself too. I'm going to recover who I was. I'm going to be strong for both of us." And it was that night, on the cold floor of the room, that my true journey began. Not the journey of being perfect, or pleasing someone, or deserving love, but the journey back to myself. The days that followed were intense and painful. I cried in hiding, especially when I was alone with Minji. I cried while breastfeeding, while changing diapers, while rocking her to sleep. The tears fell silently down my face, and she looked at me with those curious little eyes, not understanding what was happening. I felt shame, deep and corrosive shame for having allowed all of that to happen to me. How had I not noticed before? How had I been so blind, so naive, so willing to erase myself? I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a stranger, a woman with deep dark circles, lifeless hair, drooping shoulders, a woman who seemed to have given up on living. I felt anger too. Anger at him, obviously, for having manipulated me, for having planned to destroy me, but I also felt anger at myself, for having believed, for having let myself be controlled, for having ignored all the signs. The anger burned in my chest like embers, sometimes giving me energy, other times consuming me, and I felt guilt. Guilt for having exposed my daughter to such a toxic environment. Guilt for not having left earlier, when I was still pregnant. Guilt for every moment I spent crying instead of being present for her. The guilt was the hardest to carry, because it came with the feeling that I had failed as a mother, before even having a chance to really be one. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed. Minji would cry. I would pick her up mechanically, breastfeed, change her, put her back in the crib, everything on autopilot, without really being present. My body made the movements, but my mind was far away, lost in a labyrinth of painful thoughts. Other days, I tried to pretend normalcy. I sang lullabies with a trembling voice, played with her even with tears running down my face. "Where's Mommy?" I would say, playing hide and seek with my face, and she would smile. those delicious baby smiles that light up the entire world. And I would smile back, even with a broken heart, because she deserved to see joy, even if it was fake joy. The apartment became a silent battlefield. He continued his routine as if nothing had happened. He went to work, came back, had dinner, watched TV, slept. He treated me with an icy indifference that was almost worse than the criticisms. It was as if I no longer existed. Sometimes he made malicious comments, just to provoke me. "You look terrible," he would say, looking at me with contempt. "You're not taking care of yourself. How do you expect to take care of Minji if you can't even take care of yourself?" Or, "Look at the state of this house. What a shame. If someone comes to visit, what will they think?" I tried to ignore, tried not to let the words affect me, but they always did. Each comment was one more stone in the weight I was already carrying. He noticed my growing fragility and used it strategically. "You're not well, Hana," he would say with false concern. "Anyone can see that. You need professional help. And maybe it's better if Minji stays with me for a while, until you recover." He was planting seeds, preparing the ground for what would come later. And I, in my mental confusion, almost believed again, almost fell into the trap of thinking he was right, that I really was too unstable, too inadequate, almost handed my daughter over to him. Almost. But there was a small voice inside me, the same voice that made me pick up his phone that day, that insisted, "No, you're not crazy. You're being manipulated. You need to get out. You need to fight." It was this voice that made me take the next step. In one of the rare moments when he left the house and left me alone, I picked up my phone and did something I should have done a long time ago. I called my mother. "Hello?" Her voice on the other end of the line almost made me collapse. "Mom." My voice came out trembling, choked. "Mom, I need help." There was a pause, and then, "I'm coming there. Now." She arrived in less than an hour. When I opened the door and saw her face, that face full of worry and unconditional love, I completely broke down. I fell into her arms and cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried for everything I had lived through, for everything I had lost, for all the weight I had been carrying alone. She hugged me tight, stroked my hair, whispered words of comfort. "It's okay," she said. "I'm here. You're not alone." And for the first time in a long time, I really believed that maybe things could be okay. I told her everything, every criticism, every malicious comment, every moment of manipulation. I showed her the messages on his phone, which I had photographed with my own phone as evidence. She listened in silence, with her face becoming increasingly serious, her hands clenched into fists. When I finished, she held me by the shoulders and looked me in the eyes. "You're leaving here," she said, with a firmness that left no room for doubt. "Today, you and Minji are coming to stay with me and your father, and we're going to solve this the right way." "But he said he's going to get custody of her," I replied with a small voice. "He said no judge will choose me, that I'm too unstable. He's lying to control you," my mother replied. "You're a wonderful mother. Anyone can see how much you love Minji, and we're going to prove it. But first, you need to leave this place. You're not safe here, not emotionally or psychologically." She was right. I knew she was. But the fear was paralyzing. Fear of the unknown, fear of his reaction, fear of not being able to survive alone. But the fear of losing my daughter was greater. That afternoon, while he was still at work, my mother helped me pack. We took my clothes and Minji's, important documents, some personal items. My drawing notebooks, which were forgotten at the back of the closet, were the last items I put in the suitcase. I looked at them, covered in dust, yellowed pages, and felt a pang in my chest, a mourning for the person I used to be, but also a spark of hope that maybe I could be her again. We left a letter, short, direct, without emotion. "Minji and I are leaving. Don't try to find us. My lawyer will be in touch." I signed below and left it on the kitchen table. When I closed the door of that apartment for the last time, I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief for leaving, terror for what would come next. But I looked at Minji, who was in the car seat in my mother's car, and knew I had made the right choice. The first days at my parents' house were strange. I felt like a child again, sleeping in my old room, eating the food my mother prepared, being taken care of. It was comforting and humiliating at the same time. I was an adult woman, mother of a baby, and was depending on my parents again, but they never made me feel bad about it. My father, a man of few words, just hugged me when I arrived and said, "You're home now. You're safe." My mother took on part of Minji's care, giving me time to rest, to process, to start healing. He called countless times, sent messages, first pretending concern. "Where are you? I'm worried. Come home, let's talk." Then threatening, "You're making a mistake. You'll regret it. I'll get my daughter one way or another." And finally attacking, "You're crazy. I'm going to prove it in court. You'll never see Minji again." Each message shook me, but my parents were there to remind me of the truth. "He's trying to manipulate you again," my mother would say. "Don't respond. Save everything as evidence, but don't respond." And that's what I did. I saved each message, each missed call, each threat, everything that could help in the process, that would certainly come. It was my mother who suggested I seek professional help. "You've been through a lot," she said. "You need to talk to someone who can help you process all of this." At first, I resisted. Therapy seemed like an admission that he was right, that I really was unstable. But my mother was firm. Seeking help isn't weakness. It's courage. It's you taking care of yourself. I made an appointment with a psychologist specialized in abusive relationships. In the first session, I could barely speak. Sitting in that office, with the box of tissues within reach, the words simply wouldn't come out. I opened my mouth and cried. I cried and cried. Years of repressed pain finally finding an outlet. The psychologist was incredibly patient. "You don't need to talk yet if you can't," she said. "Just breathe. You're safe here." And those words, "you're safe here," broke me even more, because it had been so long since I felt safe anywhere. Gradually, I began to be able to let out what I had lived through. Each session was a painful unearthing of memories and emotions I had tried to suppress. The psychologist helped me understand the patterns of the abusive relationship, how it had started with small criticisms, evolved to control, and finally reached threats. How I had been systematically devalued until I believed I was worth nothing. "What he did to you has a name," she said in one of the sessions. "It's emotional and psychological abuse. It's not your fault. Nothing that happened is your fault." I needed to hear that. I needed to hear from a professional that I wasn't crazy, wasn't dramatic, wasn't inadequate, that I had been a victim of something real and harmful. Week after week, session after session, I was rebuilding my understanding of who I was. I was understanding that my value didn't depend on his approval or anyone else's, that I was enough just by existing, that I had the right to take up space, to have a voice, to make choices. Parallel to therapy, I also sought a lawyer specialized in family law. My mother went with me to the first consultation, to give moral support and also help financially. I couldn't pay alone. The lawyer, a woman of about 50 with a serious but kind demeanor, listened to me tell everything. I showed the messages he had sent to his friends, reported the years of control and manipulation, told about the recent threats. "Hana," she said when I finished, "you have a strong case. Very strong. He can try to paint you as unstable, but we have clear evidence that he was planning to separate you from your daughter. This shows bad faith. And you're seeking professional help. You have solid family support. You demonstrate stability. We're going to succeed." For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I really could win. Maybe I wouldn't lose my daughter. Maybe there was still a future on the other side of all this. We started building the case meticulously. The lawyer asked me to write a detailed account of everything that had happened in the relationship, each episode of control, each criticism, each threat. It was painful to relive everything, but necessary. She also suggested that my psychologist provide a report about my treatment. "This will show that you're taking care of your mental health responsibly," she explained, "that you recognized you needed help and sought it. This is a sign of maturity and responsibility, not instability." My psychologist agreed to elaborate the report. In it, she described my state when I started therapy and the progress I was making. She mentioned that I demonstrated genuine love and appropriate care for my daughter, that I was developing healthy coping tools, and that my mental health condition was evolving positively with treatment. We also gathered evidence that I was present in every important moment of Minji's life, every medical appointment. I had kept all vaccination cards, All certificates, every developmental milestone. I had noted in the phone app the date of the first smile, the first time she held her head up, of each small achievement. Countless photos of the two of us together, playing, smiling. My mother and some friends who still kept in touch with me agreed to testify. They would talk about how they saw me change during the relationship, how they saw me wither and then start to recover, about how I was always a dedicated and loving mother. While we built our case, he built his. My lawyer showed me the initial petition he sent requesting custody of Minji. It was cruel in its description of me. It said I was emotionally unstable, that I had abandoned the marital home irresponsibly, that I didn't have the financial conditions to support a child, that I had separated the daughter from her father without justification. Reading that hurt. It hurt a lot. Because even knowing it was a lie, even understanding it was manipulation, there was still a part of me that wondered, what if he's right? What if I really am not capable? But then I looked at Minji. I saw her smiling at me, extending her little arms when she saw me, calming instantly when I picked her up. And I knew I was a good mother. I knew she was better with me. I knew I would fight to the end for her. The legal process was long and emotionally devastating. It was months of going back and forth to the courthouse, tense hearings, painful testimonies. He hired an aggressive lawyer who tried by all means to disqualify me as a mother and as a person. At the first hearing, I was so nervous I could barely breathe. My mother went with me for support. When he entered the room, our eyes met for a brief moment. There was something triumphant in his look, as if he had already won. His lawyer started presenting their case. He talked about how I was emotionally fragile, how I had abandoned the marital home taking the child without consulting the father, how I didn't have my own income or financial stability. He distorted each fact, transforming my moments of vulnerability into signs of inadequacy. The respondent demonstrates clear emotional instability, the lawyer said, with that pompous tone of someone accustomed to speaking in courts. She cries frequently, can't maintain basic routines, depends on her parents' help to care for the child. This is not the profile of someone who should have sole custody of a small child. Each word was a stab, but I took a deep breath and remembered what my lawyer had told me. They're going to try to destabilize you. Don't let them. Stay calm, breathe, remember your why. When it was my lawyer's turn to speak, she presented our evidence methodically. She showed the messages where he planned to take Minji from me since pregnancy. She presented the psychologist's report. She showed the medical records proving I was present at every appointment, every vaccination, every important moment. The petitioner claims my client is unstable, said my lawyer, but the evidence shows she is a present and dedicated mother who, upon realizing she needed help, sought appropriate treatment. This demonstrates responsibility and maturity. The petitioner, however, as shown by the messages presented, had been planning for months to separate the mother from the child, demonstrating bad faith and manipulative behavior. The judge listened to both sides attentively. At the end of that first hearing, he established a provisional visitation regime. The father could see Minji twice a week, in the presence of one of my parents, until there was a final decision about custody. I left that hearing exhausted and shaken, but also with a strange feeling of having won a small battle. He hadn't managed to take my daughter. Not yet. His visits were tense. He arrived at my parents' house with that expression of owning the situation, picked Minji up, and tried to seem like the perfect father. But she, still so small, cried when she was away from me for too long. He became visibly frustrated, which only confirmed to me that this fight for custody wasn't about love for his daughter. It was about control over me. There were other hearings. In one of them, I had to testify. His lawyer asked invasive questions, trying to make me seem weak or inadequate. "Don't you think that crying frequently is a sign of emotional instability?" he asked, with a condescending smile. I took a deep breath. I think crying is a sign that I'm human, that I went through difficult situations and am processing this in a healthy way. I prefer to cry and seek help than pretend everything is fine and keep everything bottled up inside me. But you depend on your parents' help to care for the child, don't you? I accept my parents' help, yes, just like millions of other mothers accept help from their support networks. This doesn't make me less capable. It makes me smart enough to know that no one needs to raise a child alone. And what about the financial situation? You don't have steady employment currently. I stopped working to care for my daughter full-time, with encouragement from her father. But I'm already reorganizing. I have qualifications. I have the ability to work. And more importantly, I have unconditional love for my daughter and constant presence in her life, which is more valuable than any financial stability. Each answer was a small victory. I could see the frustration growing on his lawyer's face. He expected me to break down, to confirm the narrative of instability they were trying to build. But I didn't break down. My friends testified. They told how they saw me change during the relationship with him, becoming increasingly quiet, more insecure, more isolated, and how, after the separation, they saw the first signs that I was recovering. My mother also testified. With tears in her eyes but a firm voice, she told about the daughter she knew before, happy, creative, full of life, and the broken person I had become. She told about how she and my father witnessed my dedication to Minji, even in the most difficult moments, how I always put the baby's needs before my own. The psychologist was called to testify too. She explained in technical but understandable terms the effects of prolonged emotional abuse, how it erodes self-esteem, distorts perception of reality, creates dependency, and how, with adequate support, victims can recover and flourish. Hana is doing exemplary recovery work, she said. She recognized she needed help and sought it. She's developing healthy emotional tools, and, most importantly, she demonstrates a strong and healthy bond with her daughter. I see absolutely no contraindication for her to have custody. On the other side, he also brought witnesses, friends who testified in his favor, talking about how he was responsible, balanced, a good provider. But when my lawyer interrogated them, it became clear that none of them really knew the dynamics of our relationship. They were just repeating what he had told them. A crucial moment was when my lawyer questioned him directly about the messages. Can you explain to the court what you meant when you wrote to your friends that you were gathering evidence against your daughter's mother? He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I was just venting. It wasn't serious. Venting? You said textually that you were going to prove she wasn't fit to be a mother. That seems quite serious to me. I was frustrated. Relationships are difficult. People say things they don't mean. Did you say this once or multiple times over months? Silence. Multiple times, my lawyer answered for him, showing the screenshots of the conversations. In fact, it started even before the child was born. This isn't momentary frustration. This is calculated planning. I saw his jaw tighten, anger shining in his eyes. But he couldn't explode there in front of the judge. He had to maintain the facade of a balanced and reasonable man. The months of the process were the most difficult of my life. Living in the uncertainty of not knowing if I would keep my daughter with me was torturous. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, imagining catastrophic scenarios where the judge decided in his favor, and I lost Minji. But at the same time, something was changing inside me. With each hearing I faced, each testimony I gave, each small victory in the process, I felt a bit of my strength returning. I felt the Hana from before, that girl who drew, who laughed loud, who took up space in the world, beginning to resurface. I went back to drawing. At first, they were just meaningless scribbles, made in the margins of paper while I tried to process my emotions. But gradually, the drawings gained form, depth, meaning. I drew my pain, shadowy figures, twisted lines. I drew my anger, strong colors, aggressive strokes. And eventually, I began to draw hope, softer tones, more organic forms, light emerging from darkness. My mother saw some of the drawings and suggested I think about doing something with them. They're powerful, she said. They tell a story, your story. The idea was planted in my head, silently germinating. I started going out more, always with Minji. We would go to the park, walk through the neighborhood streets, sit in cafes. I would put her in the stroller, and we would explore the world together. And on each outing, I felt a bit more of myself coming back. I reconnected with a friend from university, Soo Jin, whom I had lost touch with during the relationship. We arranged to have coffee, and when we saw each other, she hugged me tight and said, "I missed you so much." We talked for hours. I told her everything that had happened, and she listened without judgment. "You know what impresses me most?" she said at the end. "It's not that you fell. It's that you're getting up. That's so difficult, Hana, and you're doing it." Those words stayed with me. I was getting up, slowly, stumbling sometimes, but getting up. The day of the final sentence finally came, after 8 months of proceedings, 8 months of anxiety, hearings, sleepless nights. I was in the room, sitting next to my lawyer, with cold hands and a racing heart. My mother was in the chairs behind us, holding Minji, who was already a year old, and beginning to try her first words. He was on the other side, with that confident expression. Even after everything, he still believed he would win, that he would take my daughter from me, that he would prove I was inadequate. The judge entered and everyone stood. When he began to speak, my heart beat so hard I could barely hear the words. He made a summary of the case, the evidence presented by both parties, the considerations he had made, and then, finally, in light of the above, this court decides to grant custody of the minor Minji exclusively to the mother, Hana. The rest I didn't hear properly. My entire body relaxed at once, as if a rope that had been holding me tense had been cut. The tears came, uncontrollable, and I had to hold onto the table not to fall. The lawyer hugged me, whispering congratulations. I heard my mother sobbing with relief behind me. And above all, I heard Minji's little voice calling, "Mama," still without clarity but with all the love in the world. I turned back and extended my arms. My mother handed me the baby, and I held her against my chest, crying, laughing, thanking. "She's ours," I whispered to her. "You're mine. Always were, always will be." The judge also established a controlled visitation regime for him. He recognized in the final considerations that there had been emotional manipulation during the relationship and that it was necessary to protect the child's well-being. Visits would be bi-weekly, always supervised, at least initially. I looked toward his side of the room. He was visibly shaken, his face red with contained anger. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw there everything he was, a small and insecure man who tried to destroy me to feel big. But he couldn't. I had won, not just in the process, but in life. I had recovered myself. I had protected my daughter. I had proven, to him, to the judge, to the world, but mainly to myself, that I was strong, that I was capable, that I was always enough. When I left the courthouse that day, the sun was shining bright. The sky was an intense blue, without a single cloud. I looked up, took a deep breath of that air of freedom, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. A deep peace that came from within, that didn't depend on anyone else. In the months that followed, life began to find a new rhythm. We still lived with my parents, but I was organizing to have my own space soon. I had gone back to working part-time at the bookstore, and was saving money to eventually rent a small apartment just for us, Minji and me. The peace I felt on the day of the sentence was settling in more permanently. Of course, there were still difficult days. Days when the memories came back and left me shaken. Days when I doubted myself, questioned my decisions. But those days became less frequent, and I learned to deal with them better. I continued doing therapy regularly. It was my space to process everything I had lived through, to work on the wounds that were still healing, to develop tools to deal with daily challenges. My psychologist helped me understand that recovery isn't linear. It has ups and downs, advances and setbacks, and that's okay. I relearned to love my own company. Before, I was terrified of being alone. The silence scared me, forced me to confront thoughts I wanted to flee from. But gradually, I learned to appreciate moments of solitude. They were opportunities to reconnect with myself, to listen to my own thoughts, to simply exist without performance, without masks. I started celebrating the small joys of life in a way I had never done before. The smell of coffee in the morning. It wasn't just coffee. It was the ritual of preparing it, of feeling the aroma filling the kitchen, of taking the first sip while still hot. Minji's laughter. Each giggle of hers was a gift, a reminder of why I had fought so hard. The sound of wind hitting the window while we watched cartoons together on the sofa. Those simple moments became sacred. The relationship with Minji deepened in a beautiful way. Without the constant stress, without the fear, without having to walk on eggshells, I could be truly present. I played with her on the floor, made silly faces that made her laugh, sang made-up songs. I was creating happy memories for her, and for me too. She started talking more, and one of the first words she said clearly was, "Mama." I cried when I heard it. Not from sadness, but from pure gratitude. Gratitude for having her, for having managed to protect her, for having this chance to really be her mother. His visits continued bi-weekly. They were tense moments, but I learned to deal with them. He would arrive, pick up Minji under supervision, spend a few hours with her, and return her. I kept everything civil, for her sake, but I established firm boundaries. I didn't allow comments about my life, about my choices, about anything that didn't directly concern Minji. And he, probably advised by his lawyer, also maintained a neutral posture. He knew that any slip, any inappropriate comment, could be used against him. The control he valued so much was now used to control himself. I went back to having a social life. I went out with Soo-jin and other friends regularly. Sometimes I took Minji, other times I left her with my mother for a few hours and took advantage of being just me. At first, I felt guilty every time I went out without her, but I learned that taking care of myself was also taking care of her. A rested, happy, fulfilled mother is a better mother. I met new people through the bookstore, regular customers with whom I had interesting conversations. One of them was an art teacher, and when she learned I drew, she encouraged me to participate in a collective exhibition she was organizing with local artists. "Your work is strong," she said, after I showed her some drawings. "It tells an important story. People need to see this." I was afraid. Exposing my work, my most intimate feelings in visual format, left me vulnerable, but it was also liberating. I decided to try. I spent weeks preparing. I selected the drawings that told my journey, from the darkest ones, made in the most difficult moments, to the lighter and more hopeful ones, made in recovery. I assembled a sequence that was almost narrative, and I gave a name to my part of the exhibition, Resurfacing. The night of the exhibition opening was surreal. There were people circulating, seeing the works, and some stopped in front of my drawings for long minutes. One woman, about 40 years old, stayed especially long-looking. When I went to talk to her, I realized she was crying. "Sorry," she said, wiping away tears. "It's just, I lived through something similar, and your drawings capture exactly how it was. The darkness, the struggle, the light at the end. Thank you for sharing this." In that moment, I understood the power of sharing our story. It wasn't just about me. It was about all the women who had gone through or were going through similar situations. It was about showing that it's possible to get out. It's possible to recover. It's possible to flourish again. I sold some drawings that night. Not for much money, but enough to make me feel that my art had value, that I had value. And more importantly, I received several contacts from people interested in future works. I started accepting commissions, portraits mainly, personalized illustrations. At first there were few jobs, but gradually it grew, and I discovered I loved it. Loved using my talent to create beautiful things, to make people happy, to express myself. It was as if a part of me that was dead had resurrected. With the extra money from drawings and work at the bookstore, I finally managed to rent a small apartment. It was modest. 1 bedroom, an integrated living room kitchen, a bathroom, but it was ours. Mine and Minji's. I decorated it with all my love. I painted the walls in light and cheerful colors. I put up pictures. Some were my own drawings. Others were from local artists I admired. I set up a special corner for drawing, with a small table by the window where the light came in beautifully during the afternoon. In the bedroom, I put her bed on one side and mine on the other, with a little curtain separating to give privacy, but still allowing me to hear her if she needed me during the night. Every corner of that house reflected who I truly was. There were colors, yellows, blues, greens. There was life. There was art on the walls. There was joy. It was the absolute opposite of the apartment where I lived with him, that cold, neutral place without personality. On moving day, my parents helped us take things. When everything was arranged and they left, I sat on the living room floor with Minji in my lap and looked around. It was ours. Really ours. A safe space where she would grow up seeing that women are strong, independent, capable. We did it, I whispered to her, even knowing she didn't understand. We really did it. Gradually, life settled into a comfortable routine. Work, drawings, taking care of Minji, therapy, moments with friends and family. It wasn't a perfect life. Life never is. But it was a good life. A life I had chosen. built with my own hands. And yes, eventually I opened my heart to the possibility of a new relationship, not because I needed someone to complete me. I was already complete alone, but because I recognized I was capable of loving again, in a healthy way this time. I met Jae-sung at an art exhibition. He was a photographer, also exhibiting his work. We talked about art, about life, about our personal journeys. I was honest about my past from the beginning. I told about the abusive relationship, about the fight for custody, about the recovery process. He listened to everything without judgment, and then he shared his own story. He had also come out of a difficult relationship, had also had to rebuild himself. I think we recognize in others the battles we've already fought, he said. It happened naturally, without rush, without pressure. We saw each other when we could, talked through messages, shared parts of our lives. He met Minji after months, when I felt ready, and it was beautiful to see how he interacted with her, with respect, with kindness, without trying to force intimacy. But most importantly, he respected my boundaries. When I said I needed space, he gave it. When I had a difficult day and needed to cancel our plans, he understood. He never tried to control me, mold me, diminish me. He saw me as a complete person, with history, with wounds, with strength. You're incredible, he said once. Not despite what you went through, but including all of it. Everything you lived made you who you are, and I really admire who you are. I discovered with him, and with myself, that true love doesn't squeeze, doesn't control, doesn't hurt. It's light, respectful, and starts from within. Before being able to truly love someone, I needed to love myself first, and that's what I did. Today, when I look back, it still hurts a little. It probably always will, because scars exist and sometimes throb, but it's no longer that paralyzing pain that prevented me from living. It's a pain that reminds me of where I came from, what I overcame, the strength I discovered within myself. It's a pain that taught me. It taught me that I'm stronger than I imagined, that I can fall and get up, that I deserve respect, genuine love, peace, that my voice matters, that my space in the world is legitimate. I don't have anger toward him. Not anymore. Maybe that surprises some people, but it's true. I have pity, perhaps. Pity for someone who is so insecure he needs to diminish others to feel big. Pity for someone who lost the chance to have a real family, built on love and mutual respect, because he couldn't love without controlling. But it's not my responsibility to save him or heal him. My responsibility is to myself and my daughter. And that's what I focus all my energy on now. I learned that life isn't about finding someone to complete you. That's a myth, an illusion, a dangerous trap. Life is about becoming complete within yourself, and then, if you want, sharing that completeness with someone who deserves it, someone who adds, not subtracts, someone who illuminates, not who dims. I learned that happy endings don't come from charming princes on white horses. They come from within, when you decide to choose yourself every day. When you wake up, and despite the difficulties, decide to take care of yourself. When you establish boundaries. When you say no to what doesn't serve you. When you allow yourself to take up space in the world. Are there still difficult days? Of course. Are there moments when insecurity knocks on the door and tries to convince me I'm not good enough? Certainly. Are there times when I catch myself doubting my decisions? Wondering if I'm doing everything right? Absolutely. But the difference is that now I know how to deal with those voices. I have emotional tools that therapy gave me. I have a strong support network. My parents, my friends, people who truly love me. I have self-love, which is the foundation of everything. And most importantly, I have the certainty that I deserve good things. I deserve respect. I deserve love. I deserve peace. Minji is growing up beautiful and strong. She's 2 years old now. Talks nonstop, is curious about everything, loves drawing with me. Sometimes I look at her and see traces of her father, the shape of the eyes, the smile, but it doesn't bother me anymore. She is herself, a unique little person, and I'm grateful to be able to be by her side on this journey. I don't know what the future holds, no one does, but I know that, whatever happens, I'll be okay, because I recovered, because I found myself again, because I learned I'm enough. And you know what's most beautiful? I'm teaching this to my daughter. Not with words, She's still too small to understand complex concepts, but by example, she's growing up seeing a mother who works, who creates, who has friends, who establishes boundaries, who respects herself. She's growing up seeing that women are strong, independent, capable of rebuilding their lives as many times as necessary. I want her to grow up knowing that no one has the right to diminish who she is, that she doesn't need to mold herself to fit into anyone's love, that her voice matters, her dreams are valid, her space in the world is legitimate, that self-love isn't selfishness. It's a fundamental necessity. I want her to understand that healthy relationships are